Okay, so welcome to our Sunday morning Torah and coffee. And just before we start our class, I did want to show you over here that we have a beautiful small, when I say small is, intimate little class here for the ladies this morning. Like a class, a program. I didn't even know the exact details, but I just walked in here as they're preparing, and it looks so nice and beautiful. So just a little shout out. Look at this delicious, beautiful breakfast. I'm telling you, I want to dig in. Look at this. So beautifully set up by, I'll take a little pride by my daughter, Rebbetzin Chaya Yaris. Beautiful job setting up. Look at this. And just a nice little, when I say little, meaning, nice intimate class over here that's about to start. So ladies, next time you see a class about to happen, sign up. It's a class, I think it's called like a yeshiva day for the ladies. And that's just by way of introduction and publicizing a wonderful activity. So now let's go into the office. Try to begin the class. I don't want to show you the mess, because you know what it is. No office should be messy, correct? Now we'll turn the video around and we shall begin our Torah study. Okay, let's go. Let's put this onto the stand. Let me shut the music in the background. Ein minut, bear with me. And let's make the usual bracha, the blessing that we say before we begin our class. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiya bidvaro. So today's class begins, the title of the class is, Are You a Good Jew? And that's a loaded question. And the reason why I picked that title is because I quite often get that comment where someone says to me, Rabbi, I am not such a good Jew. And there's a story with the previous Rebbe. The previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who went through, the communist persecution and fought to keep cheters and synagogues open during that time of religious persecution, was sat in Soviet prison, etc. And there was once a Jewish philanthropist, I believe, a lady, I don't recall her name, and she met the previous Rebbe, I guess with the perhaps the intention of supporting some of the work of the Frierdiker Rebbe, of the previous Rebbe, and she right away started the conversation with the following opening statement. She said, Rebbe, I am not frum. Frum in Yiddish means I am not religious. It's just, by the way, just as a side point, it's what we would call somewhat a Yiddish machla, Yiddish sickness. I think that it's more common by Jews that they right away have to proclaim their religious level of observance. I'm not sure that happens. Maybe it does in other religions, where someone walks into to whether it's the priest or the imam or whatever it might be, and right away declares their level of religion. But it's not uncommon that someone would come to the rabbi and say, I want you to know I'm not religious. Okay. So in this case, she said to the previous Rebbe, I am not frum, I am not religious. And the previous Rebbe answered her the following. The previous Rebbe said to her in Yiddish, and again, I like to get a thumbs up for Yiddish. The Frierdiker Rebbe responded to her and said like this, Frum veis nor der Eibishter. Translation, religious, only God knows who is truly religious. Who is truly religious is something that is something that is part of a deeper relationship between you and God. So with that somewhat introduction, I want to discuss the question, but really it's all as a way of a lead-in, as an introduction to the month. Today is Rosh Chodesh Elul. Rosh Chodesh Elul is the month that we are entering tonight. there's 2 days Rosh Chodesh, sometimes the last day of the previous Hebrew month, and the first day of the coming months are both Rosh Chodesh. So today is the 30th of the month of Av. Tonight is the 1st of Elul, but today already is Rosh Chodesh Elul. So I want to talk about that and express something practical, and hopefully bring this all together. With Hashem's help, with God's blessing, we'll be able to do so. So, are you a good Jew? Am I a good Jew? How do we measure that? So let's talk a little bit about, maybe answer that question and Elul with another story. The story is told about a dad who was very successful, well-to-do, and wealthy. And he had his son, who was already an adult on his own right, living in his home. And basically the son was, his child was living at home and doing nothing, lazing around. And the father was like annoyed because he was capable, and he was concerned about his son, and he used to nag him. And one time he really nagged the son about the fact that he's just lazy and doing nothing and not making anything of himself. And it so sort of annoyed his son that he said, "You know what, I'm out of here. I could make it on my own. I don't need you, Dad." And he leaves the home. He has nowhere to go. So he ends up sleeping on a bench. And he's sleeping on a bench. And some fellow sees him and says to him, you look fairly young. You're sleeping out here in the street. Perhaps I need some help in my garden. If you come help me with my garden, I will pay you. I'll reward you. He said, fine. It wasn't exactly very comfortable sleeping in the street. So he went and he started to help this fellow in his garden. And he was, did a good job. So he basically hired him. And he started to work in the fellow's garden. He paid him. And as he made a couple of dollars, he recognized that he's added up a couple of dollars, and he's decided to try something. And he went ahead and he started to take some of the grain, I guess, that he was part of this garden. He would pay the guy for the grain, and he started to make some bread and sell the bread. And he actually was successful. He was successful in that endeavor, and he decided to open up a bakery. He opened up a bakery, but he opened it up in some part of town that wasn't necessarily the best part of town, and basically whatever money he put together from his hard work, he basically was going down the drain. And as he's sitting there, and he was really miserable because of his hard work and the bad investment, so on, someone walks into the bakery and says to him, I really like your bread. I think you could do better. I'd like to become a partner. I'll invest. Let's move to a better place. I'll be your partner, and let's see what we could do. An angel from heaven. Imagine that. So that's what he does. He opens up in a different location. He has an investor. He has a partner, and he does really well. And they end up opening up some more branches throughout the city. He opens up 5 different branches. And at this point, he feels confident enough, and he sends his dad a letter. I guess he sends his dad a letter. This is the way the story goes. This is, I guess, before phones and so on. And he says to his dad, he writes to his dad, Dad, I don't need you. I worked hard, and I made, but at this point, I'm worth, $50,000, and I'm good. He gets back a letter from his dad, and his dad says, I'm really, really happy to hear that. But I want you to know, did you stop and think why all of a sudden you were approached on the bench and somebody just out of the blue decided to offer you a job in their garden? Did you think perhaps how that happened? Number two, he says, when your bakery, early bakery investment went bad and someone came in there and offered to be a partner, did you think how that happened? Let me tell you, my loving son, I orchestrated for these people to come and help you. And that's the story that is told. And the message in this story is that as we are in the month of Elul, the month of Elul is the last month of the Hebrew calendar. And it is referred to as the Chodesh HaCheshbon, the Chodesh of stock taking. The Chodesh of stock taking, of spiritual stock taking. You know, for any business to be successful, or even if it is successful, to reach its its full potential and to increase and to improve and to grow, you need to have some serious accounting and stock taking. Elul is the last month of the Hebrew calendar, and it is the month of preparation for Rosh Hashanah, where we come to God and we ask for a new year, the days of judgment, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And any business, even if the business looks like really busy, you look inside and there's a lot of customers there, it does not mean they're doing well. Maybe these customers are just there looking for prices, comparing prices. They're looking at their phone app to see if they can get better deals elsewhere. You only know if it's successful if you sit down, you have a balance sheet, you look at what came in, what came out, and you analyze the different practices of the business. And you analyze the personnel of the business. Who is a drag? Who is not being utilized? Whose talents are being overlooked? Whose talents could be better put into a different area in the business, etc., etc. And only then can the business prosper or reach its full potential. Now, if it's so with our sort of financial world, our material world, how much more it is with the main purpose of our existence, which is that God created us to utilize our souls, our character, our talents, and so on, in a way that we do the following two, what's called Bein Adam LaMakom and Bein Adam LaChavero. We enhance our relationship with God and our responsibilities to Him, and that also includes Bein Adam LeChavero, between man and fellow man. In fact, Elul, the acronym for Elul is Ani LeDodi V'Dodi Lo. If you take the words Elul, which is the name of the Hebrew month that we're in, Elul is Ani, the Aleph, LeDodi, the Lamed, means I'm to my beloved and my beloved to me. Many are familiar that might be a verse that's on a chain that you sometimes have. A groom will give it to the bride. I'm to my beloved to me. It's from King Solomon, but it represents the month of Elul, because this is the time of the year that we turn to our beloved. We, as the bride, we're compared to the bride in relationship to God, and we turn to God and we show our love to God by taking, as I just mentioned, introspection of how to improve as we are getting ready for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And I want to give some specific examples on this issue, which are important and practical. So there's actually an article that I read from Rabbi Mendel Kamener. He's a Chabad rabbi I'll find out soon. And he puts it in a very, very nice way. And I want to share that because a lot of times these ideas are sort of somewhat lofty, but not necessarily practical. So I want to share how he put it is. And the title is, and you could find it on our website or on CoralSpringsChabad.org. If you want if you want the link, I could gladly send it to you. And he goes ahead and he breaks down the accounting that one should do in terms of spiritual improvement during the month of Elul in a very nice, practical way, and I want to talk about that. So he says like this, and I'll put in my own thoughts into each of these steps as we discuss them. So again, let me back up and make it clear. During Elul is called Chodesh HaCheshbon. It's a time of introspection. And by the way, to digress for a moment, the concept of Elul being a month of repentance, a month of introspection, so that we approach Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur with a whole different mindset, already began with the beginning, or almost the beginning of Jewish history, with Moses when we went out of Egypt. Moses goes out of Egypt. We all know and are familiar with the sin of the golden calf. Moses then goes up to the mountain and asks God for forgiveness. And the last 40 days that Moses went up on the mountain, and where God said, Salachti kidvarecha, I would totally forgive the Jewish people, happened from Rosh Chodesh Elul till Yom Kippur, meaning from tonight until Yom Kippur is exactly 40 days. During this 40-day period, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was on mountain pleading to God to forgive the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf, which is one of the most cardinal sins that we have committed right after receiving the Torah. Since then, it has become the tradition that these 40 days are days of repentance, are days of asking God for forgiveness, days of introspection, days of self-improvement, and culminating with Yom Kippur. So there is historical background to what we are discussing today, the month of Elul. So, we're talking about stock taking and how to prepare yourself for Rosh Hashanah. So here there's a couple of steps, 5 steps. 5 steps. Okay, step 1. Step 1 is draw 2 large squares on a piece of paper. Do this homework. If you do these following 5 steps, I could assure you, you're going to enter into Rosh Hashanah with a much more elevated state. Just a much better, more spiritual, more Jewish experience. Okay, listen to this. Draw 2 large squares on a paper. The first one says me and God, and the second one says me and my fellow man. Okay? Now, in the category of me and God, write down the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs that it's not about what you want to do, it's what God has commanded us to do. And there are specific mitzvahs. For example, there's the mitzvah of tefillin. There is the mitzvah of kosher. There's the mitzvah of keeping Shabbat. There's the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles. These are all mitzvahs which are primarily between man and God. So draw a box and write down these mitzvot. Okay? And there's many mitzvot. I'm just picking some of the more, me and mezuzah, right? Me and daily prayer. These are mitzvahs. Put them in this box. Okay? Then make us draw a second box, as mentioned, and in that box, talk about or put in me and my fellow man. You know? How have I, you know, the obvious relations between your fellow man, you know, your children, your spouse, your parents, your friends, your work buddies, your acquaintances, and so on. Put that into that second box. Those are sort of the relationships you have with fellow man. So that is step number 1. Step number 2. Actually, I'm sorry, that was step number 2. Step number 1 is drawing the box. Hold on, maybe I'm wrong. 1 second. Yep, that was step number 2. Now, I do want to tell you the following. In step number, hold on a second. I'm reading. I'm sorry. Now. I want you to write down, this is all part of step number 2. Write down whether you have incurred a loss or a profit in this category. So, for example, let's take a mitzvah of tefillin. Have you incurred a loss or a profit this past year? Because Elul is retrospection for the year. And keep in mind, for what one person is a profit, for the other person is a loss. If somebody has never put on tefillin before and they put on once this year, that's a profit. If somebody did so once a week and this year they added a second day, that's a profit. For someone else who is accustomed to put on tefillin every single day, if this year they've missed on, that's a loss. So there's a profit and loss, and the same thing goes in your relationships, of course, as mentioned, between fellow men. Have I spent more time with the family? Have I created an environment of peace in the home? Have I reached out to my friends? Did I have a year of profit in my relationship to man, between man and God, and man and fellow man? And this is something that will take time. But companies take off, sometimes shut down for a day or for 2 days or 3 days to do this evaluation. So this is not, like a quickie. This is something you have to say, I'm going to put aside time for this. Because one of the qualities of man, as opposed to, let's say, animal, is that man can improve. Man can make moral choices and say, this area I got to improve, I got to become better, and so on, as opposed to things just being done by instinct. Okay. So these are the step 1, 2, and 3. Step 1 is draw the boxes. Step 2 is ask yourself, between man and God, have I had a profit, so I had loss? Step number 3 in my me and my fellow section, also ask yourself about your relationships in all areas, important areas, of course, and ask yourself, have you gone up or gone down? Okay. Now, the next 2 steps are the most important. Without these next 2 steps, all the time that we have spent, and you will have spent up to this point, is not important. The next 2 steps is you have to ask yourself, how do I take the losses of the year and turn them into profits? That's the ultimate question. In other words, a person, I don't know how to stress this enough to myself and to you, the listeners, to dwell on the past without a clear drive to how to improve the future is not only a waste of time, it's damaging, it's depressing, it's destructive. All this is okay. And now what? How do we improve for the future? So you have to ask yourself a practical question. We gave tefillin as an example. How do I make sure to increase this coming year that I put on tefillin on a more regular basis, on a daily basis? How do I improve the atmosphere in my home? There's ways. It's not just going to happen. You have to sit down and think about it. What is it that I can do to improve the atmosphere of my home? How could I devote more time to my kids positively? How could I spend more time studying Torah? Studying Torah is critical in who you are as a person, as a Jew. I said this who knows how many times. Being a Jew is not just about eating latkes. Being a Jew is not just about having brisket. Being a Jew is not just about enjoying sushi or whatever it might be. Or some sort of cultural remembering growing up in the Catskills. Being a godly human being is just that, is really addressing your soul, your purpose, what you're here for. And when we come Rosh Hashanah, and we ask ourselves, we asking God for another year, what are you coming like a schnorr and say, I just want to continue having ice cream and having a good time, and that's what I want another year for? I just want to live like a hippopotamus? There's meaning and purpose to life. There's a reason you have so much depth and so many talents and so many relationships with people. You need to turn that into something godly and holy and meaningful and positive and kind and generous, etc., etc. So you have to ask yourself, how could I have a net gain? How? What's your plan to have a net gain? A new mitzvah, perhaps. Reaching out to a new person, a new relationship that I will improve upon. And now, I want to go to step 5. Step 5, we somewhat touched on step 5, but step 5 goes beyond just the practical. It also deals with the underlying attitude of what brings certain patterns. during this month, you have a whole month to do it as we prepare for Rosh Hashanah Elul, in a loving way, because we're blessed that you could do this. You could have this self-improvement. You could have this true self-analysis. But step 5 is, after you have these step 4s written down and it's clear, you have to really ask yourself why, what's the underlying reason for these patterns? Why are these things reoccurring? Why are these weaknesses happening? Why don't I spend a little more time doing mitzvahs? Why is it not important to me? If the answer is because I wasn't born religious, think about that for a moment. This is not about being religious. This is about God gave you a life. God gives you life every single day. Hopefully, He gives you health. He gives you a brain. What do you do with it? You don't have to be born. You don't have to, what does that mean? And even if you weren't born, I could assure you, your grandparents and great-grandparents were observant Jews. But this is more about baby steps. This is not about, a full transformation. This is now about net gain. How could I be more than I was a year ago? And beyond the practical, you have to ask yourself, what's your mindset? What's your attitude? What's causing the perhaps not full best activities, actions, again, both on your relationship with God and relationship to your fellow human being? These are questions you have to ask yourself. A living thing grows. One of the signs that something is alive is that it grows. If it's not growing, usually it means you're not alive, and so too spiritually and Jewishly and so on. So coming this year, it's not just about membership. It's not just about satisfying maybe your parents or grandparents or your Jewish guilt to come and get a seat at the synagogue and so on. It is about true, with life and with enthusiasm, with excitement, appreciation for who you are, how wonderful it is that you have this knowledge, you have this exposure and so on, and how to make that better. And that's what 5 is about. And I would recommend that one of the ways, in other words, one of the ways to change your perspective on life, both between God and your fellow human being, is to awaken within yourself your deep-seated commitment to fulfill your spiritual calling in life. And in order to help you do that, besides the introspection, I would recommend is what you expose your mind and heart to. We live in a time that we're constantly bombarded with messages, and most of them are not necessarily positive, unfortunately, and we allow it into ourselves, and that aggravates us, whether it's political, whether it's social activism, which often are important and good, but more often it's just negativity and people getting you aggravated and you're just allowing it to live in your world. Spend more time on Torah study, on meaningful things, on things that help you change your perspective, both as a human being, as a Jew, as we're coming to the Jewish New Year. This is part of what Elul is about. And I want to conclude also with one, talking about mitzvahs. I want to conclude with a mitzvah which is part of the message of the story that mentioned earlier about the child that left his father's home. It is interesting that Maimonides says that during this time, especially Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, one should increase in mitzvahs, but he also mentions specifically charity. One should increase in charity. Why does Maimonides highlight charity? Because, and based on the story that I shared about the father who was behind the scenes and basically gave his child whatever he had in order to be successful, when we come during this period of time and we approach God Almighty for a new year, for blessings, for health, we come, as the expression is, and King David referred to himself as an oni, as a poor person, meaning we don't come in demanding that you owe us this. No. We know that whatever we have And whatever we've achieved is because God has blessed us so. He's given us health, He's given us wealth, and so on. And therefore, when we come and ask in the time of judgment for a new year, we want God to treat us measure for measure. What do I mean by that? Meaning, if He's going to treat us specifically by what we've earned, we might fall short, because how much of it is really something that we have earned as opposed to the means and the gifts that we've been given from above. What we have perhaps earned is the choices that we've made. But having said that, Maimonides points out that during this period of time, we increase in charity. The message and the reason for that is because we want God to treat us measure for measure. The Gemara, the Talmud tells us that God treats us midah keneged midah. How we treat others, God treats us. So by being less discerning and being more giving to people who, in a non-judgmental way, to people who need, whether it's financial help, emotional help, psychological help, whatever it might be, a kind word, where if we give in a non-judgmental, kind, sincere way, we elicit from above a similar response where God will be less judgmental with us, that even if perhaps we're less deserving, He will definitely grant us, all of us, a good and blessed, sweet new year for this coming year. And on that note, I want to say that Chabad's policy is that you do not have to pay to pray. Every single individual is welcome to come and join us for the holiday prayers. You do not have to reserve a seat. Yes, we have reserved seats for people who want to be in a given section or want to make sure that you have a particular seat, you want to sit next to so-and-so. But the door is opened. Every person, every single individual who wants to come pray during the high holidays is welcome. We would love for you to come, feel comfortable, invite others, whatever it might be. So that's that. Everybody, make sure that you take these words seriously. Both me and those listening, share these kind words. Thank you for joining us today. I welcome your feedback. Have a fantastic week. This Wednesday, again, we will be having our food distribution during the summer. It's a little bit harder to get volunteers. We would love if you could, talking about increased mitzvahs, what's a greater mitzvah than helping give others food? So please, if you're able to volunteer or your older child is able to volunteer, please help us. Have a fantastic week.